Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Sustainability Partnerships webinar for November 24. As usual, we will give it a minute or so past the start time before we go into the introductions and who we have. Great to see so many familiar names, and then always great to see some people who we've never had on our webinars before. Always great to have new people added in to our community at Sustainability Partnerships. My name is Georgia Halston. I am the CEO at Halston Group. Sustainability Partnerships is one of the businesses under that group. And you'll see me be the chair of many, many webinars if you want to look back on our website. So the huge amount of webinars and resources that we have had in the past. So we're getting to about a minute past, half past, so I'll do a bit of an introduction as to what we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about transforming theatres. This is a topic that comes up probably every year for us. It's one that's super, super important. As we know, the NHS is responsible for around 4% of the UK's carbon emissions, but a significant slice of that is within hospital theatres. Luckily for me, I don't have to go through any of those stats because I have one of our most prominent speakers on climate change in the NHS, Frank Swinton, who's going to kick off with a bit of a presentation for us today. We're then going to move on to the guys at Brandon Medical. We've got Richard McCauley and Christina Hooley with us today. If you want to give us a wave, guys, it's great to have you here as well. And then finally, we're going to finish off with Ruth Bakerson-Lowe from Vanguard, and she's going to give us a presentation to finish as well. As always, this whole session is recorded. It goes live onto our website with all of the resources and all the presentations that everyone has done today. If someone can please put something in the chat so that I know that the chat function is working, because it doesn't always work for me. It sometimes doesn't work. Oh, yeah. Please feel free to say hello and add any contact details. If you want to speak to each other, add comments, anything, please use that chat function. If you have a question specifically for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A function. So that's separate to the chat function. It just means that at the end, after we've done all the presentations, I can then pose your questions to the speakers, but I might lose them in that chat. So, but feel free to have all the conversations that you'd like to in there as well. Frank, I'm going to hand the reins over to your very capable hands. We've had you on panels in real life as well as on webinars. So I'm really, really happy to introduce you again. And you've got a bit of a presentation to share with us today. You're in situ, you're in your scrubs, you're very authentic for us on today's show. So do you want to give us, anyone who doesn't know you, please let us know who you are and what you're going to be talking us through today.
Yeah, thanks, Georgia. Thanks for your flattery. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I'll take it. It's nice to be back here. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Frank Swinton. I'm a consultant anaesthetist up here in West Yorkshire, just between Leeds and Bradford at Airedale Hospital, but I'm also the climate change lead for the Integrated Care Board here in West Yorkshire. So I'm responsible for the whole of climate change for the whole of health and social care in West Yorkshire. So nice small job. I'm going to share my screen with you, and you will see that I've been asked to talk today about, wait for it, priorities for carbon reduction and sustainability in the operating theatres. So, and I've got about 10 minutes. So for me, this is all about doing no harm. And it turns out that in providing healthcare, we're doing a ton of harm to the environment. I suspect you all know that already. That fact sits really, really uncomfortably with me. You know, I'm supposed to be making people better. And in fact, although I might be helping to make the individual in front of me better, the greater society is paying an enormous, terrible cost for the healthcare that we provide. If that's news to you, then let me give you a little bit of evidence from the BMJ, which said back in, I think, 2019, that if the healthcare sector was a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter on the planet. So hooray, we've got a massive problem. That's not in any doubt. We can do something about it. And I think, as Georgia's alluded to, the operating theatres are really, really resource dense sectors, areas within the hospital. And I think that there are several dimensions to reducing our environmental impact in the operating theatre. And I've broken them down by sort of workforce group. So clinicians like me, there's loads of stuff we can do. I'm not going to talk through all of those because for those of you that know what this means, you'll be able to whiz through it. And for those of you that don't, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But the bottom line is we do things because we've always done them, or we do things sometimes for convenience, or because we think that they're expected of us. And I think we need to challenge those paradigms and do things differently, or go back to the way that we used to do things because actually we've introduced changes for no benefit. A lot of this stuff is already found in the getting it right first time work stream and or in the model hospital. And I expect there's going to be more and more of this coming through Wes Streeting's 3 shifts that he's speaking about in response to the Darzi report from earlier in the year. There's a load of stuff that the estates and facilities teams can do, things like fitting automatic light switches so that lights go on and off without us having to remember to turn them off when we leave things like storerooms and changing rooms. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in the operating theatres doesn't need to run 24/7. It could come on half an hour before the list starts in the morning, and it could finish half an hour beyond the scheduled end time in the evening, or even half an hour after the lights go out, or half a minute after the lights go out. Waste segregation. I feel like I've been talking about waste segregation all my life. It's never sexy. It's still important. We do it really badly. There's great guidance out there, not least from the Association of Anaesthetists on their website. But we're still doing it really badly. And I think this has come even more to the fore in the last month or so, when there were headlines about how burning waste for energy, be that heat or electricity, is now the most polluting form of energy production in this country, now that we've got rid of all the coal-fired power stations. The procurement team, they have a role to play. And this is starting to come in, thanks in no small part due to the standard contract and the evergreen framework. But stuff like buying reusable equipment is more expensive at the outset, but cheaper in the long run generally. Trying to use local, small, medium enterprises to keep the economic activity within the region. Repairing rather than replacing our equipment. And being explicit with suppliers that climate change is important. And we know that as the NHS makes this transition to be net carbon zero by 2040, then across our whole, and by 2045 across our whole supply chain, we're going to be asking more and more and more of suppliers, can you really demonstrate that you're net carbon zero? Can you be sure of that across your whole supply chain, right back to wherever your equipment is dug up or brought out the ground? Suppliers, of course, have a huge role to play. And some of this is kind of difficult in terms of the finance, because it makes sense to sell us the same thing over and over rather than sell us it once. But there are ways around that. So servicization, I think, is a big opportunity, is a huge opportunity in healthcare. So rather than selling me the light fitting in the ceiling, sell me the light, sell me the service, which is that when I flick a switch, I am bathed in light. And then the benefit of that is that the onus on the durability of the equipment is on the provider, on the supplier, and they will invest in higher quality light fittings, which will last longer and which will be easier to reuse in other settings or to repair. And I will pay a monthly or annual fee for the service of the light. This is a bad example because they're both called light, but I will pay for the service of the light rather than the mechanical light or the electrical light fitting. And I think there's loads of opportunity in healthcare to leverage that. I haven't seen it happening very much yet. It's obviously a big change to business models, but I think the opportunity is there. And I'd love to be involved in a pilot if anybody's got anything they want to talk about. Packaging, I mean, it's right up there with waste, isn't it? It's never sexy, but it's still important. I think there's opportunity for reusable packaging. So be they metal or plastic or wooden crates, ship your stuff to the hospital, unload your product, and then ship the packaging back to the factory, ideally with the used items inside it ready for reprocessing and reuse. So the other big one on this, and I've alluded to that earlier, is quantifying your carbon footprint, because the NHS has a mandate to be net carbon zero. We're going to be asking about that more and more and more. Okay, so in the future, what's going to happen? This is the big one. And of course, I don't know any more than you do, but my guesses would be that in the next 10 years, I think we will continue to see supply chain problems. They've been much more obvious in the last 4 or 5 years, even pre-COVID, so 5 or 6 years, much more obvious than they were 20 years ago. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of migration. That's going to be driven by climate change. It will be internal and external. So I work in the hills in the Yorkshire Dales, or close to the Yorkshire Dales, and people are going to come to Yorkshire, to the hills, even from within the UK, because the low-lying land is going to be flooded or the coastal areas are going to be eroded. We're going to continue to see a global shortage of anaesthetists. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The poor are going to get poorer. We're going to see increase, because of all of the above, we're going to see an increase in the inequalities in society. And I predict that there will be conflict over water. And you could argue that actually we're already seeing conflict over water. That's one of the big drivers for the over-tourism discussions in the islands in the Med. So in Mallorca, etc., where they don't have a huge amount of fresh water, the tourists are coming in, they're demanding swimming pools and hot tubs and hour-long showers, and that's using a lot of their fresh water, which they don't then have for eating and drinking. So I predict that there's going to be conflict over water in the years to come. So if anybody's got any good ideas for magicking water out of thin air or dry air, then I suspect that the next 10 years are going to be the time for you. Of course, those are the sort of, a lot of those are the small picture things that we can control. But actually, what we really need is systems change. We need to change the way that we think about healthcare, and we need to move much more towards prevention rather than treatment. And that's another one of where Streeting's 3 shifts. So it's got to be prevention rather than treatment. It's got to be digital rather than analog, and it's got to be close to home and in communities rather than in hospitals. So I absolutely welcome the dialogue coming out of the Department of Health, and I think that it's a really exciting time to see what's going to happen in the next few years. I think there's going to be a huge amount of change. I hope that it's as smooth as possible, and I think there are things that we can, and I hope some of the stuff I've said has been useful, that we can plan towards those changes so that it's not too turbulent when it happens. That's my email address. I'm very happy for people to get in touch. Happy to take questions. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Frank. Great to have you and to have a frank discussion as we always do when you're on. So some people have asked, yes, the slides will be shared, they will be downloadable on the write-up. Thank you, Richard, for coming as well. I see you're on the train joining in, so appreciate you always giving us that support. There's a lot of really important points there. I think that the point about water coming up is really important. I think that where we've said around how suppliers are looking, we all know the onus of scope 3 is being pushed onto suppliers and really delving into stats around the carbon intensive processes that happen when it comes to the supply chain into businesses that then sell into the NHS, and how we're quantifying that. I think that one of the concerns, Frank, and I hope that a lot of people on here will be agreeing with me in that there's still not necessarily a robust enough framework for businesses to be able to say, how carbon intensive. And I think that a lot of the time when we work with the entire time that I've run things with sustainability partnerships is that the inequity for smaller and less lucrative businesses in terms of being able to have the time and resource to put that type of information together. But all going in the right direction. And we do have to start somewhere. There's no point in doing nothing, right? Frank will be putting, I mean, you've mentioned that was your email address there. If you want to put that in the chat as well, if anyone wants to get in touch with Frank, I would absolutely recommend just having a conversation. In general, you might end up going down rabbit holes like I have in the past. But if you do have the time, it's a very, very important person that I think that we've had in our network for a long time. So thanks so much for that, Frank. I'm going to move on to the guys at Brandon Medical. I've got Christina and Richard today giving us a bit of a double act from where they are in the office. Do you want to give us an intro to who you are and what you do, please, Richard and Christina?
Hello, I'm Richard McCauley. I'm the National Specification Manager for Brandon Medical. We manufacture medical lighting systems, operating theatre systems, and control systems within operating theatres. So this is especially important to us, is the link between what the controls in the operating theatre do and what the management systems, the building management systems do. So I'm going to explain those to you. Nina?
Hello, everybody. I'm Christina Hooley. I'm the Global Marketing Manager with Brandon Medical. My day job is to translate in plain English what a whole bunch of very smart engineers and our R&D are doing, especially on the integration and improving the way the solutions are delivered on site with the hospitals and improve the customer experience.
Okay, if I can find my presentation. There.
Everybody for your patience.
Thank you. We'll be there in a second. Yes, there we are. So I'd just like to do a quick run through on the transformation that's happening in operating theatres and where we're seeing, especially from a technology point of view, where we're seeing technologies being deployed in operating theatres to support the green initiative within the NHS. So in the operating theatres that we're seeing come through in specifications at the moment, one of the key things that we're being required to look at by the architects and by the client teams is flexibility in the design of the underlying technology. So this is where we're being asked to be ready for providing information out to building management systems, where we're measuring power, where we're measuring airflows, where we're measuring temperatures. And this, I think, ties in with what Frank was saying about the data that you can gain from inside the operating theatre. Before you can really make an impact on anything, it's always a good position to start from, is measuring and having a known value for what you're using. So how much power we're using in operating theatre, how often it is being run. And it's always been a little bit of a difficult situation because in the operating theatre, we have a lot of medical equipment, we have medical devices, and we have the specialist lighting systems in there. And building management systems and BMS platforms generally that are deployed across the hospital estate don't particularly link well into these devices. So what we do is we basically build a pathway for this information to be taken out and placed on a wider network so it can be analysed. And also we're seeing a big increase in the amount of video technology that's being used in operating theatres, whether it's endoscopic, laparoscopic, where it's camera systems in theatres. This is for feeding AI systems, for feeding communication systems, for remote support for surgery. So often at the point when you're designing the theatres and you're putting the technology package together, you don't really know exactly what's going to be arriving in there. You don't know whose stack's going to be there or what equipment they're going to be bringing into the theatre that you might need to integrate. So we've started to design along the IP internet protocol-based system, so basically networking, and that gives us the freedom to move the images around where we want them, process the images as required, and also share these images and share the data with external areas. So that in areas outside of the theatre, we can monitor what's happening in there, or we can do two-way conversations with other clinicians in other theatres supporting our procedures. So it's really about building a very flexible operating theatre. And part of that brings us straight into monitoring the environmental performance of the operating theatre itself. The ORs are very complicated in terms of power systems, backups, isolated power supplies, all the interconnected systems that live in the OR. That really we need this data out, and it's been Frank mentioned it, and so others previously. A lot of the time, lights are left on almost all the time. There's no need for a light in an operating theatre or even the room lighting in operating theatre to be active when the operating theatre is not active. Same with the air handling units, same with ultra clean ventilation systems that take huge amounts of power. These need to be running when they're required and not running just as a matter of course that somebody starts the operating theatre every morning. And the key to this, to getting control of this, is to monitor it and feed that data back into the BMS so that we can analyse. Probably the most common way of doing this is with an intelligent theatre control panel. This is our ITCP here, which in a modern operating theatre replaces the traditional stainless steel control panels that we all used to do battle with years ago with dials and gauges and clocks everywhere. But this allows all the devices that are in the OR to speak to external systems, so such as the BMS. So the BMS doesn't have to specifically be designed to talk to an air handling unit to know whether it's in setback. The theatre control panel, which is what the theatre staff and the theatre nurse uses to set the room up, actually already has all that information in it because it's already connected to all these devices. So using a standard protocol, which is called BACnet generally, because this is a network-enabled device, we can take this information and feed it externally so that it can be monitored, so that we can do trending, and so that we can get the data that we need to look at how the theatre is being used. Also, this device can actually turn things on and off when they're not used. So we can put air handling units into setback when there is no movement in the theatre. We can do air quality monitoring, and with particulate monitoring, we can then control the ultra clean ventilation systems so that we're only running the UCVs when we need the clean air and when there are people in the room. We're not running the UCV 12 hours a day just in case. And this also brings up the ability of putting things into setback, dropping temperatures when the room is not used and raising temperatures. And we can also monitor all the alarm statuses in there. So we've got anesthetic gas, we've got gas pressures, and safety locks. The interlocks for things such as laser. or X-ray within the theatre. We can monitor when this is being used. We can ensure that the interlocks are in place. We can also inform the BMS. That means that we can do trend monitoring. How often are these devices used, and what's the impact on the room when they are used, and what's the impact on the energy usage within the room. Just slightly moving on to the OR light system, one of the huge advances in reducing energy consumption in the operating theatre has been the introduction of LED lighting, which run at a fraction of the power of the old halogen lighting systems. But these are still developing as well, and the newer LED light platforms now that we're using and that are available on the market are much lower power consumption than even the first range of LED lighting. So the new ones are about 40% more efficient than the original lighting systems were. They also allow us to do things with the color temperature and the visible color range as well, which means now we can adjust the not only the color levels, but the color temperature and the amounts of particularly reds and blues in there. So we can get a different visual. So when we're looking at different skin tones, we can actually tune it more into the way that the human eye works rather than creating just a flat. So it's a better, more comfortable environment to work in when the lighting works better. And also we incorporate now ultra high definition 4K vision systems in these. This isn't only from the stacks. We're now starting to see this come through actually in the lighting systems. This means that we can do AI analysis and we can do augmented reality overlays so that we can actually make the operating theatre more efficient place because we can provide the clinician with much more information. So in a similar way to in endoscopy, we can do overlays on the video feed there, which can highlight certain areas, especially damaged tissue and things, where we use the augmented reality system to highlight the visual system. We're now seeing this coming through as a request in the operating theatre itself with the lighting systems in there. So again, we're moving to high quality vision systems in there to make a more efficient operating environment. So this brings us on to actually how we get to design the theatres and what we need. And I'd like to pass over to Christina to just talk you through this section.
Hi, everybody. So earlier, Frank was mentioning change. A lot of change is coming towards us, and the key to achieve our sustainability goals and reducing the carbon footprint is a change in behavior. Is a change in behavior, the clinician level and activity, but also when we set up operating theaters, when we design, to think ahead for the change that is coming towards us. And that is impacting, as somebody was commenting in the chat, exactly what we're talking about, scope 3. So if the specifiers put an operating theater together and it says, get this package together as it is, and you have no flexibility. You cannot change the light if it's not up to specs. You cannot change the light if, you know, a better offer comes that, you know, offers remote servicing or is more local, so on and so forth. So the key point to achieve sustainability at the point of designing an operating theater is to design for flexibility and efficiency. You have to take into the account when you design the operating theater that you will never, ever have the final answer right now for 1 year, 2 year, 5 year time. So always design with the thought in mind, there will be many unknowns. There might be unknowns in the requirements for the sustainability, for the KPIs. There will be a lot of unknowns on the level of the clinical equipment innovations that we don't know right now what great innovation is going to happen in 2 years. So we need to design the framework, the capital equipment, the control panels, the BMS in a modular way, sort of like Lego, So we can accept, as much as possible, a plug and play for innovations that don't exist now. So we then don't end up with a whole load of metal and plastic and gases in LEDs and whatnot that we have to rip it off, put it in the skip, and start from scratch because there's a new cancer treatment equipment. So modularity and scalability are key. Another key that I think is really important is to try as possible to build collaboration between suppliers, clinical equipment innovators, medical technology, medical devices, capital equipment, to achieve a level of standardization so we can create operating room environment, that can be designed for the needs of the clinical team. Recently we had a situation where we had the same equipment on two different NHS trusts, only, a few miles down the road, exactly same equipment, but the way they were using was different. So we had to set it up differently. But because our package is put together under the principles of a SMART approach that we call standardization, modularity, adaptability, reliability, and technology integration, we were able to do that. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Just pressed the wrong button now on the wrong computer, but there we go. The dangers of running two computers. So if I can just bring our little section to an end. So when we're considering as manufacturers how we implement climate smart healthcare, these are the goals that we work to. So adopting sustainable practices, that's not only in our manufacturing side of things. We have solar energy here, we have heat recovery in the factory, and we do actually, we're fortunate we're big enough to actually manage and measure the impacts, and we know what our power consumptions are and where we're saving. But we also use the technology that's applicable. So there is a lot of technology that's not just built for healthcare, whether it's technology that comes from automotive design, whether it comes from gaming systems, whether it comes from aerospace. There are a lot of similar technologies that we can use and bring into when we're doing medical device manufacturing. And making the devices that we make energy efficient. So not only with LED lighting, but also with power consumption, the power supplies that we use in our control systems. Building in the ability to do real-time monitoring. So we actually know what our devices are doing while they're running. And that brings us to basically embracing the whole climate smart technology package so that we can know the value of what we're delivering across to our customers.
Can I add something?
Yes.
It's more on a general terms, is basically there isn't a solution off the shelf right now to fix or, to tick off the KPIs for sustainability. But I think probably with everything in life, what we need to do is just start and do a change and continuous improvement every day. And applying principles from other disciplines, where we're talking about software development, is document the change that has been made and the impact that it has. Because, regardless of what's happened, there is staff rotation and so on and so forth. They don't want to end up, down the road 3, 4, 5 years. And, the estate manager will not know why a certain piece of equipment is there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Always love to talk anything IoT. And I think that even in the nearly 4 years, well, it's 3 years of running sustainability partnerships, the concept of things like real-time monitoring have moved on leaps and bounds in that time, and not just the technology behind it, but the understanding of the benefits that come along with that, and I'll ask you a little bit more about that later. But one of the things that I'm really pulling out from what your guys' presentation and what you're trying to really prove at Brandon is to do with that modularity piece, right? About being flexible, about being agile, and about the fact that actually you've learned that things will change tomorrow. So let's make sure that we design and we think in terms of how things can be modular, so that you're adding things on, you're not redoing every time. So love to hear that from you guys as well. I'm going to just quickly remind everyone, if you do have questions, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. We do have some questions in the Q&A function, so if you do have any specifically for any of our speakers, please pop them in there as opposed to the chat. But of course, feel free to keep on having conversations in the chat with each other. Ruth, I'm going to hand over to you, please, at Vanguard, to finish off our presentation section.
Thanks, Georgia. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Share. Oh, sorry. I'll put this on here. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ruth Bakerson-Law. I work for Vanguard. We are a medical device remanufacturing company. What I wanted to do really quickly was just to give you an overview of what medical device remanufacturing is for those who may not know about it, but also give you an overview of the journey that we've had. I've been with the company for 4 years, and it's gone from strength to strength. And I know that a lot of people have already heard about this. And so I think for those is to give an update of where we are to and where the whole medical device remanufacturing sits within the NHS as well. Frank mentioned before, and I won't go into this into too much detail. And again, I think everybody knows these figures now because it is a real talking point that the NHS, it is a real significant polluter. There's some statistics there where there's 590,000 tonnes of waste produced by the NHS, and it produces 5.4% of the UK's greenhouse gases. If, like me, that you can't picture that, there's this lady called Maria. Maria had I believe it was mastectomy a few years ago, and she was very aware of the waste that was produced by hospitals within Europe, and she asked at the end of the procedure if the waste from her particular procedures could be kept. And this is what she created. There's a video, if you Google this lady, there's a video that's really, it just gives a clear picture of the problem that we're facing. And if you picture that's from a single procedure. There's over 10 million procedures completed in the UK in a given year from 3,000 operating theatres. So that should just give you a bigger picture of the problem we face. The NHS is aware of this. There's multiple there's multiple documentation now that's looking at what the NHS can do to reach net zero. And please look up these. I know these slides will be available, but look up this documentation because it mentions what we do and other things too that can be done to help achieve the net zero. But they've created the medical technology strategy. There's an intercollegiate green theatre checklist, which was done by the Royal College of Surgeons, which mentions about the use of remanufactured devices in there. There's the how-to guide that was completed by the NHS England as well, which talks about how to implement our service into your healthcare system. The latest one is the Design for Life roadmap, and everything talks about moving towards devices that are designed to be decontaminated, reused, remanufactured, reducing the demand for the raw material, and just increasing the extent of the supply for the medtech. So yes, please, and I've got these later on if you want to take a picture of these if you want to have a read of them. So what is medical remanufacturing? It's where we take a device that is used in theatres, and this device is then sent to our head office where it goes through a real rigorous process so that it can be reused once more, or more than each device is remanufactured a number of different times, depending on how many times we can achieve the remanufacturing process, and making sure at the end of that process that the device works exactly the same as the original. You get all the same safety with that device, all the same warranties with that device, all the same liabilities. We become the original manufacturer of that device. With medical remanufacturing, it's creating that circular economy. So you don't use the device and throw it in the bin. Within that device, there's plastics, there's metals in there, which are all precious materials that rather than just throw it away, let's just reuse it just to help the environment. What we do keeps cost low for the NHS as well, and there's absolutely no compromise on safety or performance. Just to explain the difference between remanufacturing and recycling, recycling is another great initiative that is taking place, and it is becoming more, people are becoming more aware of it. But the difference is with the recycling. So again, take the device that's used in theatre. That device is used and thrown away. With recycling, that device can be made into a chair, a table, as an example. But you're still having to find the metals and the plastics to create a new device. So the step before the recycling is a remanufacturing. Recycling really complements what we do well, but remanufacturing is seen as the better option because of what it presents. It's been happening for years. It's commonplace in Europe, Canada, Israel. We as a company have been doing this for many, many years. We've produced over 3 million devices safely. We've got 76 UK hospitals. We've got over 1,000 customers now within Europe. And what's really interesting too is what we do is actually offered by the original manufacturers of the equipment, just not in the UK at this moment in time. But the harmonic devices are remanufactured by Johnson & Johnson in America. Stryker are involved in remanufacturing too. So it is something that's happening and it's growing. And everything that we do is fully regulated. So you can see here that we've got the certificate of quality assurance, and everything is completely regulated, safe and above board. There's lots of data out there on what we do. If you look at the top right hand corner, the Association of Medical Device Processors, if you click on that, if you go to that website, there's data available that dates back to the 1980s, and it looks at patient safety, the experience of using remanufactured devices, and the safety, effectiveness, and the cost. And they conclude here that the use of remanufactured circular catheters is safe, effective, and reliable. Just to let you know, with the products, each one that comes to us has to go through the same checks that the products do for the CE mark. But on top of that, we have to do an extra 20 individual tests. And the difference also with our products is we don't do bulk testing. Every single device that goes through our process is tested. So every single piece of equipment, every catheter, every scalpel, each and every one goes through the security check. The benefits for the hospital, so there's financial benefits and the environmental gains. So savings, obviously we have to get these devices to remanufacture them. So it's a completely free service where we provide you with the necessary equipment for us to collect the devices off you, which you get paid for. We can then remanufacture those devices and make them available as a buyback, where you get 50% savings for that product. And then there's also the reduction in the waste savings, because the waste is no longer going through your hospital. And then there's the environmental footprint. We're reducing what's going to landfill and incineration. We're reducing the demand for raw materials. And there's approximately 50.4% reduction in carbon footprint reduction, sorry. And the thing is, you don't have to change your existing practice. You're using the same devices as your practice isn't changed at all. We work with the cath labs, we work with the theatres, and just some examples of some of the hospitals we're working with. So Royal Surrey received payments of 1,225 for the devices that we purchased from them. They diverted 54.18 kilograms of waste, and they received savings of £109,540 through the devices that they use. There's also a carbon footprint reduction of 828 kilograms. And St James's University in Leeds, again, they received 2,713 payments for the devices we collected. 49.51 kilograms of device was diverted from waste. £97,000 were the savings that they made through the use of the remanufactured devices. And there was a carbon footprint reduction of 500 kilograms. And again, we do the same in the cath labs too. And you can see the figures here where savings are in excess of over 100,000, and the kilograms of carbon footprint reductions that are available there too. So please do take a look at these documents because they explain what we do. This is from the NHS's perspective and from the Royal College of Surgeons, and it also tells it also mentions other things that you could do as a trust to decrease that carbon footprint reduction. And there's my details should anybody want any further information.
Thanks, Ruth. I really appreciate that. Frank, did you know this was happening at Jimmy's? That's your patch, isn't it?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute. I caught you off guard.
I didn't know that it was happening at Jimmy's, but I do know that it's happening sort of around the place. Yeah, it's a brilliant idea. It's an absolute no-brainer. Why aren't we doing this? You
are. At least we can say Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust is on board. That's our patch for anyone who didn't know that Frank and I are in Leeds. There's a question I'm going to jump straight into for you, Ruth, that Sarah has posed, and it's just straight off the back of your presentation. So I'm just going to jump straight into that. And Sarah's had trouble convincing clinicians to trial remanufactured devices, specifically electrophysiology catheters. I'll get it in the end. Due to concerns about performance, despite the evidence that they are safe, and she wants to know if you have found this and how you guys are working to convince people who are potentially resistant around that pain point.
Yeah, no, it is something. It is something that happens, and I think for me, what I've done is I've put those consultants in touch with consultants who are using the devices, because if they're speaking to an actual user of the product, I suppose that you can't get any better than that. Though we've got tons of evidence, like I say, the AMDR has got lots of evidence, and so we can also provide publications, and what we can do as well is we can offer trial of the products too. So if we need to, if we need to support hospitals that way too, we'll do whatever we need to do to support you.
Is there anything that you would want to add to that, Frank, that you think we can do for this convincing phase?
Well, it's difficult for me to comment because it's not something which I've seen in my sphere of clinical practice, so I can't easily talk on behalf of others. But I think speaking to other clinicians that are using these things successfully is definitely powerful. And there's always something about, particularly for this sort of high resource dense stuff, about talking to individuals and having the relationship and saying, look, I understand your concerns. How about if we try using it in one patient and have a brand new one on the side ready to go in case it doesn't work or you're not happy, and then there'll be, the risk is absolutely minimal. Or offering some sort of gain share. Hey, if you do this and it saves your department £20,000, then we'll put up £2,000 for that new piece of kit you're trying to raise money for, or make it a win-win for everybody, I think.
Great advice. Did you have something there, Richard and Christina, that you wanted to add to
that? Well, certainly when it comes to a recycling point of view, one of the paths that we investigated and we do actually go down is on life cycle recycling, where equipment's removed from theatres. We actually, about 50% of our market is outside the UK, and we have a very large market in Africa and other developing nations. Mm-hmm. So one of our recycling initiatives is to bring back, repair, test, and then sell the entire light structures on again, but into a different marketplace. So basically sell them as second-hand refurbished units.
one of the other questions that's up here, and it's in the same vein as this conversation, and it's in the same vein as something else that I wanted to ask the guys at Brandon, but I'll because it's posed here in the Q&A, I will ask you about this. It's from Trudy, and it's for you, Frank, and it's about people being engaged. And she's found that specifically with gloves, they have not necessarily seen the engagement or piqued people's interest around the sustainability front, but more around the cost savings and their skincare and maybe having softer hands after using the gloves all the time. So I don't know how we as a community maybe can work together to come up with more engaging ways to communicate around sustainability. What do you think?
I mean, different people have different buttons, don't they? And part of the sort of frustration is that it feels a little bit like a war of attrition because you've got to find every individual person's thing that they're interested in and then push those buttons. But gloves are a really interesting one because again, there's loads of ways in which people might engage with that. And so it might be your hands or your individual skin will be better. It might be that it's saving the trust money. It might be that it's reducing plastic pollution. Excuse me. It might be that the evidence is quite clear, actually, that particularly during COVID, huge numbers of healthcare professionals in this country started wearing plastic pinion gloves rather than washing their hands. And actually, the rate of infections in some places has increased because our hand hygiene isn't as good as it used to be. Mm. So actually, by using gloves and thinking that's safer, we're causing damage and using resource across a whole raft of different dimensions, when actually the thing we need to do is stop wearing gloves quite so much. And there are specifics around this, but what we need to do is wash our hands with soap and water. So I think the trick is in finding what interests the person you're speaking to. The problem we have in terms of sustainability is that you can't just have that discussion with every single person on every single thing that we're trying to change. So perhaps there's an opportunity for us to say, look, rather than us have this discussion on every single thing we're going to change, let's go through it once, and then you kind of need to suck it up a bit and do the hand washing and use the remanufactured equipment and turn the lights off when you leave the changing room.
Super simple stuff, basically. And the guys at Brandon, what I wanted to talk to you about in a similar vein was in terms of the mindset change, the adoption, etc. And like I said, we've been talking about IoT in industries like manufacturing, for example, for the last 10 years, right? Industrial IoT is not a new thing. And manufacturing is a sector that has really taken this on, particularly in this country. But do you feel that healthcare has been sort of behind in terms of the understanding and adoption rate of things like real-time monitoring to really implement those into a more sustainability-led narrative? And what are you guys doing to ensure that the engagement is carrying on and people are continuing to turn around to your kind of the stuff that your guys are implementing in the NHS?
Good question. I think for quite a long time we saw pushback from IT departments in hospitals. Hospital trust IT departments did not like anything going on the IT network that they didn't fully understand. Now, that has improved over the last 5 or 6 years. We've now got to the point where IT departments have caught up with what's happening in the commercial world and the understanding. With a few people have changed and new people come in. So that's led to more adoption of putting IT systems in place. One of the other problems that we saw is that really, although it was possible to put systems in place for monitoring, nobody really knew what to do with the data or why they were going to do something with the data. So we would say to them, look, we can monitor power consumption here, we can monitor airflow, that can get your efficiency stats. You can then do accessibility. And this ties in with what Simon Rollison's asked in the Q&A section about the data for infrastructure and equipment failure and what works. We can tell what every single item that we're connected to in an OR is doing, and we can tell whether it's working or not. And we can feed that information back into the BMS system and the plant management system so they can monitor and actually get real-time data of how often things are available. But the issue has always been who in the trust has a responsibility for collating this data, and then why are they using it? And that's changed recently with the push towards sustainability, because now there is a reason, because the trusts have been told they need to measure their performance and how well they meet targets, and they've been given targets, how well they meet them, and they need to know what resources they're using and when and why. That's now driven it forward. So it sort of took a change to the top. The technology's always been there, as you said, in every other industry. The technology's been there for years. You know, cars have had black boxes, planes have had black boxes in them for 20 years. You suggest to a surgeon that you're going to put a black box in a operating theatre, which we can do, and you get a fairly horrified response that nobody really wants to go down that route. But regulatory change can really bring that forwards and mean that we do monitor things now. And now there's a reason for it. They're going to use that information.
Add something to your answer. Another problem that stands in the way of adopting IoT and real-time is the fact that a lot of hospitals, the network is really, really poor bandwidth, you know, and that is being nice. And there can be all the willingness and the understanding that all these technologies, they're there actually to help them on day-to-day activity beyond the sustainability, and there would be willingness to adopt it, but there is a physical barrier to doing so. And again, we're going back to the same, you know, thinking ahead and flexibility. There is any regeneration project of an old hospital, and maybe they're not there with the budget or with the specification to look at the system, to put the system in place. What we recommend, first thing, put glass fiber cabling, you know, and it's there when you are ready with processes and with KPIs to move ahead. Just do today something that prepares the foundation to implement tomorrow IoT systems and real-time monitoring of data.
Putting in the high bandwidth networks is key to all of these things working, because everything is communicating over the network. So that's right at the design stage when the new hospital is built, or when we're doing a refit, or it's a PFI life cycle. Everything's going to hang on the network, so get the networks right.
Well, I wish I had more time to talk more around everything that we talked about today, but we do only have 2 minutes left in the session. This does always happen. And there are some more questions on that. There is one that you might want to type the answer to while Ruth, while we just finish up here around what % of manufacturing devices were not working as expected. I don't know if you just want to type that. As always, the whole session has been recorded, and all of the resources that we've talked about will be in our write-up on the sustainability website, and that'll go out to everyone on email as well. I just wanted to highlight as well, if one of my team can please put in the chat the link to our NHS Sustainability Partnership Awards. So that's happening on the 5th of December. Everyone is welcome to come and view the awards ceremony. It's just a webinar just like this one. All of the awards have now closed. We have 3 weeks of judging to do, and we have some very esteemed judges on our panels who are judging both the NHS Trust Awards and the Business Awards as well. So we're excited to put the put them through their paces. We've had a lot of entries this year. We always have record-breaking numbers. So please, if anyone, the link is there now. So please, if you do want to attend that, or you want to get the recording of it, you just sign up to that event, and you'll be able to see who's a winner this year and who's making big strides in the sustainability front in the NHS. So we are completely out of time, unfortunately, for today, but thanks so much to everyone who's joined us as usual. I know a lot of people had to drop off. I think there's a lot of crossover maybe with other meetings and things, but I appreciate everyone who's managed to stay with us till the end of the session. Thank you so much to Frank, as always, for supporting us and giving his insight from the front line of what's happening. Thanks so much to both Richard and Christina from Brandon Medical for joining us and talking about one of my favourite subjects, which is IoT. Thank you so much to Ruth as well from Vanguard. I really appreciate you getting in touch and showing interest in giving us updates on what's happening at Vanguard, because I have been in touch with you guys before, and I really appreciate you getting back in touch with further insight on what you've been up to in the remanufacturing space as well. And thank you everyone who has joined in for all the great questions. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you at the awards on the 5th of December. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.